Hi, this is Don Clark with FileMakerProGurus.com and FM Database Consulting.
And I'm Susan Finema, Chaos Eradicating Officer for Beyond the Chaos.
I love that title still. Hey, today we're going to be talking about company and subcontractor management, communication requirements. How do you bring a sub on board? Working and managing efficiently with different clients and timekeeping obligations, that type of thing. You want to start it off, Susan?
Sure. So I think, starting it off, you want to set some clear expectations of what the communication requirements are for your team, right? Mm-hmm. For example, should a subcontractor speak to a client without you or another team member present?
Not without permission.
Right. Absolutely.
Or the guidelines set up in advance, I should say.
Right. Guidelines set up. Do you want them to record every meeting they have with the client, via GoToMeeting or Zoom software?
Yeah.
What internal software tools are you asking your team to use in order to be able to communicate well? What
are some of those tools that you like to use?
Slack is a huge tool. I love it. It allows you, especially as a subcontractor, if you're working with multiple clients, you can communicate with them all at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a great tool. There is a Basecamp Chat in Basecamp 3 that also works similarly if you're using Basecamp 3. But other tools might be things like your software or your project management tool and how you expect your subcontractor to enter notes and how to communicate, so that if you are asking them to manage the project, are they managing the project, but you still know what's going on? Right.
You're kept up to date as the contractor or the person responsible.
So Don, you've probably had that before. Have you had problems where a subcontractor goes off and you don't know what they're doing? You don't know what the client needs. You don't even know where the project is?
Yeah, I don't want to share too many details. But they promise things and they don't do them. They repeatedly promise things and they don't do them. If somebody says to me, I'm going to get on that tonight, or this afternoon, and I'll have it fixed by tomorrow morning. Oh, looks like we lost our web's back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
The way it is. So, somebody promises something, and in my opinion, if you promise it, you make it happen. If you can't, then you reach out and say, okay, my truck broke down, blah, 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 and I can't. And that works once, maybe twice, but it doesn't work every time you promise something.
Right.
And so then get it done.
They need to get it done, and the other is that, if you have asked, and I am sorry if you can hear my dog barking in the background. It's live. If you have asked a subcontractor to work directly with a client, you also need to know what they talk about. Right? They can't just go off on their own like it's their own project. It's not, because the contractor is still responsible to the client.
Right. What did the client ask for? What did you promise as a result?
When's it due?
And if there was how much time involved,
right?
Especially in the case of a change order. It's just something new. If it's something new, you definitely need to be I need, as a contractor, to be in contact with the client to get a change order going.
Right, exactly.
And expect it to be done for the same amount of money that if you're doing it as a project. If they're not doing it as a project, you still need to let them know. If you're just doing by the hour, you still need to say, okay, this is something we hadn't discussed before. Be aware of the fact this is going to add 4 or 5 hours to what we're doing, or whatever the number happens to be.
Right, and it's important, I think, from that standpoint, as a subcontractor, that you're also approaching it as a business person, right? Not just a developer. Another thing is, as far as communication requirements, is I always suggest don't ever give your personal cell phone number as a subcontractor to a client, ever. Okay. There are many ways to set up communications that don't involve that. If you're using Slack, you can do conference calls via Slack. Okay. You can set up Zoom and have conference calls via that method, which also allows you to record it.
This is what we're using here too, by the way. And I record all my Um, almost everything I do with a client, I'm sharing a screen. I can share my screen. I can record it. And if they're interested, I send them a link. Upload the Dropbox, send it to them, or share it to them from iCloud or from the cloud. On Zoom.
As a project manager, I would tell you that you want to post that to your project management tool too, as a history, as you can always go back to it, but it keeps all of that in one place.
Right.
The other is that if you are working with a subcontractor on a regular enough basis, you might want to set up an email address for that person at your domain.
Right.
So that they look more like they're part of your team, and then also you have access to those communications in the back end.
Right.
You don't want to lose sight that the client's still yours, even though the subcontractor might be managing them.
Yeah. And well, let's change gears here a little bit real fast. How do you bring a sub on board? What's your opinion on that?
Oh, sure. So, explaining your company culture and your company structure is important. They need to know what your expectation is of how your company presents itself to a client.
Okay.
And to that degree too, remembering that every touch, every interaction with a client is branding to your company. Your subcontractors, if you're the contractor, your subcontractors are a reflection on you.
Oh, yeah.
You want them to understand how you are different from everyone else that does this, and what you expect them to present.
Good points all. And there's going to be training involved.
Right.
Not just training on being a FileMaker developer. We hope that they're up to speed on that kind of stuff, although most of us are always open to learning new stuff. But the training in terms, like you were just mentioning, dealing with the customer, keeping your time, keeping proper notes, updating things the way they need to be updated.
But even with the software, right? Is it overly complex? Is the solution that they're working in something that you actually need to walk them through? And what does the client, where did we leave off? What does the client expect? What does the client also develop in this? That are they going to be walking on your work? All of those things are important to discuss. Now, if you're with a very senior developer, they might just be able to jump in and do it, and it's fine. But as a more junior developer, they're probably going to need a lot more hand-holding. You're going to have to answer a lot more questions. You should never expect that they're just going to figure it out by themselves.
No, and you got to also, even with senior developers, you may have something that you're doing that's new. For example, connecting to Amazon.
Oh, yeah.
Pulling data down, and they haven't done Amazon before. Well, are they supposed to figure it out and they get paid to figure it out? Are they supposed to, how's that supposed to, or am I supposed to help them, or somebody else in the organization is supposed to say, okay, here's some code, here's some references from on site. Let those things be known so that they're not guessing. More importantly, they're not charging for everything while they're learning.
Right. You can't, if you as a contractor say, oh, you don't know how to access Amazon. Okay, let me teach you. So then the question becomes, are you training somebody? And also, if you're a contractor, aren't you like, well, I'm teaching you how to do this, so you should be paying me, right? Not the other way around. Or is this only for this one client? Is it a specific thing about their server? Well, that might be billable to the client if it's specific to them. Or maybe if you're learning and coming up to speed, you reach an agreement where, hey, as we do this, we'll split the fee in half and we'll pay, you learn, you get a little done, we'll do it for half rate. And then once you're really in, we'll do it for full rate. But if I'm teaching you something that is a new training technique or new lesson for you, that might, as a subcontractor, you might just say thank you and not bill that at all.
Yeah, that's generally what happens, as well as we talked about that our last time we met, which is, doing things over, or covering your own, which generally falls back on the subcontractor. All those things are different for employees. They're going to get paid because they're there every day or part-time or whatever it is, whatever they're expecting to get paid for. They will do it over because that's what their job is, you know. So, but it's different.
It's different with a subcontractor, right? You know, the other is making sure you have a clear onboarding and offboarding process, right? Okay. What passwords are you giving people that you know you need to change if something doesn't work out or if they leave?
Yes, client security.
What's the list to all of the software and client material that they should have access to? Okay. All of those things can be very consistent between each developer. So have a list that you always just run through. Oh, they need email, they need Slack, they need Basecamp, all of that kind of stuff so that you can set them up quickly.
Right, and access to, a shared Dropbox folder, for example.
Right, perfect example.
Yeah, and again, other things like communication. Again, we go back to communication, setting up the obligations and the structure for communication. And one more thing that just occurred to me. When you bring somebody online, you need to let them know what happens if the customer puts something on hold.
Right.
Cancels.
And that's important to note too. And as a contractor also to let your client know that if you put this on hold, there's not a guarantee I can get my sub back when you're ready. Mm-hmm. Right. You might if you're going to put this on hold, you might encounter some fees of somebody else coming up to speed on this. Okay. And so that's something that you can set the expectation with the client and the subcontractor.
Yeah, and if you want something rushed at that point, there could be a rush fee.
Right.
To get somebody to be able to drop something else, to go to that trouble, to contact their their people, us, to rearrange schedules and things like that, and probably work into the evenings and on weekends and holidays and stuff like that if it's a real rush project.
Well, and it'll affect your other clients.
Yes, exactly.
So, all of those are challenges that you have to discuss. Mm-hmm. Communication, I think that's been our theme.
That's been our theme, and I think that we can call it quits there today for this with that message. Communication is the big key. You got to make sure that everybody understands from both sides that communication is critical. Open lines of communication. Don't be afraid to speak up. That doesn't mean be rude. It just means It just means, hey, I got a concern, or I got an issue, or here, there's something. Have you thought of this? There's something you need to consider. Anyway, great communication is a great thing to have, and it's going to make your life a whole lot easier. So that's about it for this. This is our third video that we've done. We've got a series of 3 more videos coming up in the new year. Susan, do you want to touch on those?
Those are going to be more about project management than about subcontracting. How to better help your team, whether you're a big team or a small team, be able to finish your projects, right?
There we go.
Not just have them run on forever. So we'll talk about that.
Get your client to sign off so that there's a line between the project is now done and this is a whole new thing.
Right. And support agreements. We'll talk about that.
Support agreements about that as well. So, okay, we'll see you all in the new year. Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.